Hey everybody, it's good to see you here again for our prayer and gathering for this week. This is going to be our last week looking at Honduras. We're going to start something else next week. But as usual, I have all your pictures out here so I can look at you as we're doing this. One thing we do not have today is a guest. Starting next week, hopefully we'll be having guests again, and I'll tell you about that as we finish up. But we're going to kind of this week, of course, after we look at our prayer sheet, and I will send that out to you and make sure that you have that in your hands. I really appreciate the prayer requests you send me each week, so continue to do that. You can do it anytime during the week, and I'll try to make sure they're added to the prayer sheet. But this week we're going to kind of do a greatest hits version of a Honduras thing, and we're going to go back over all the years that I've been to Honduras and some of the things, some of my favorite things. We're going to have several MVPs along the way, and you'll see those as we bring those up. But as we start, I want to just show you one thing that you've probably seen before, and then something else too that I always like to show. The first one is I have pictures of all of my translators here. I've had a different one each year. It's kind of interesting that every year I go there's a different translator, and one of these folks is not like the other. As you can see, 2014 was Dennis. Dennis was he was transitioning out of the children's home, and 2015 was Leo, and Leo has been there every year since then, and I've done some things with Leo. When I preach, Leo would translate, but Leo has only been my translator one time. 2016, Eli was my translator, and we didn't go in 2017. 2018, Victor was my translator, and 2019, last year, Harrison, spelled Jerson, yeah, that's pronounced Harrison. And this year, Shirley was my translator, and she was the first female translator I've had. And so anyway, that's been my translators. And here we go. This is one of the cute things because, you know, some of those Hondurans are descended from the Mayans, and the Mayans were very short people. So it makes Steve look like a giant here, doesn't it? If you consider those to be regular sized people, and then you see Steve, wow, he looks like he ought to be in the circus. Okay, and the next one, we both look like we ought to be in the circus, and these two. 2016 is when we first started doing these kind of crazy things, and you see they get a little bit crazier every year, and finally this year it got dark, and we decided to shoot this, and I kind of wish it was a little darker so you couldn't see what we look like, but that was us this year acting a little bit crazy. But now just to kind of go back and look at each year. The first year I went was 2014, and we were in Yayupe. The unusual thing about that year is we went to the airport on Saturday morning. Part of us were going through Houston. The rest of them were going through Atlanta. The Atlanta group got away fine. Even though our flight was supposed to leave before theirs, our flight was delayed, and we knew at like 5 o'clock in the morning that we would not be going to Honduras that day because of our flight delay. We discussed maybe getting on a flight to Atlanta, but there was no guarantee that once we got to Atlanta we could get on the flight to Honduras. So anyway, we waited and wound up going to Houston, spending the night there. And this picture is the shirts that we wore on Saturday morning are the shirts that we're wearing Sunday night in the village. Now, we did take them off when we got to the hotel in Houston. We did fly on to Houston and got up early the next morning and flew down to Honduras. So it was a couple of long days for us, my very first couple of days on the trip. Actually, one of those was days in Honduras. Okay, it's kind of interesting to see Noah as he grew up along the way. Noah looks so young in that picture. Of course, Elizabeth, she looks younger, but she's pretty much grown at that point. And this is me kind of photobombing them if you see me in the background there. So we were having a little bit of fun. Here's my MVP on that first trip, and probably the MVP of all of my trips. That's Scott Harris, and Scott and Danita went with us that year, and later on, before the next year, they got married. But the reason I say he was my MVP is, you know, the first year you go down there, you usually forget a few things. And everything that either Steve or I forgot, we would ask Scott. He said, oh yeah, I brought an extra one of those. It was amazing he brought the same size suitcase as I did, but yet he had all of these extra things that would help us out. One of the most important things is I forgot to bring a journal, and he had an extra journal, and I've made sure from then on that I always have a journal so I can keep up with what's going on. Okay, then 2015, this was a year I came back from Israel on a Saturday, and the next Saturday I went to Honduras. And this is me picking coffee beans. There have been coffee beans growing other places, but San Isidro was up in the mountains and had much more coffee beans than the other places we've been to. Here is me actually picking a few of those beans. I tried to pick the high ones because you saw earlier how short some of the Hondurans are, so they would have to have a ladder to reach some of the beans I was reaching up there. Okay, and that year I also preached every evening service. I don't remember a whole lot about it. Like I say, I was still kind of jet lagged from Israel, but God sustained me through that time because we had the most amazing experience. We had finished talking to everybody in the village of San Isidro on Tuesday, so Wednesday we went over to a neighboring village called Las Flores, and we were going up and down the street and having some decent success. But then as we came back up the street, I was actually not supposed to be working that side of the street, but the other group had already gone by, and the teacher came out and asked if we would come in and tell their class about Jesus. And it was a one-room schoolhouse. You see the picture here. The kids are all different ages, and he was teaching them English along with other things. So I got to share the gospel with them, and it was just a special time. Of course, when you ask how many have accepted Jesus, they all raise their hands. But I believe a few of those decisions were genuine. So it was really an experience like I've never had any other time. Okay, then 2016, we went to Siwaka, and the reason I've got a picture of this lady is she was like the first person I went to visit on Monday morning, and I presented the gospel to her, and she accepted Christ. And then she asked if I had a medical card, and nobody had ever asked me that before. So from then on, up through this year, I always take medical cards with me and dental cards with me. Because the people, when they come to the clinic, they have to listen to the gospel in a large setting before they can come and get a medical card to get into the clinic. So it just makes sense, since I was presenting the gospel to them, that they were having the same thing so they could get a medical card. And so one of the things we wind up doing, though, is we spend a lot of time filling those out, but that's okay. We really want to help them out so they can get to see that. Now, here's my MVP for that year. I don't know if you can see him, but that's Larry White back there preaching. We went with us in 2016, even though he wasn't our pastor yet. I remember Steve and I were talking on the trip, and we're saying, yeah, he's going to be our next pastor. He's going to be our next pastor. And sure enough, before too long, he was our next pastor. But he did a great job preaching down there. He did a lot of door to door and a lot of other things. But the thing I enjoyed most was getting to hear him preach each night. And so I called Larry the most valuable preacher MVP that happened in 2016. Now, here's another thing from Siwaka. You see a picture here. You saw earlier my translator Eli is in that picture, but the guy closest to me in the picture, his name is Ricardo. The first day we went out sharing, Eli and I shared the gospel with Ricardo, and he became a Christian. And so the next day on Tuesday afternoon, I looked up and he was there with us. He was going around with us, showing us where to go and share the gospel with other people, because he knew the people in the village and knew where they lived. It was just an amazing thing, because he was with us all Tuesday afternoon. It was with us all day Wednesday as well. So it was a great experience to get to know Ricardo a little bit better. Okay, we didn't go in 2017. 2018, my MVP here is most valuable pavement. This road is by far the best road we'd ever ridden on in Honduras. Look at that. It's even got lines. Now, they don't have the passing lanes, because there's really kind of no such thing as a passing lane in Honduras. You just kind of pass whenever you want to. But anyway, that was the best road that I've been on in Honduras. Okay, and I've got a picture of Victor here, because if I had to pick my favorite translator, not necessarily my favorite, but my best translator, Victor did a great job that year. It seemed like we would be talking to someone and we'd share the gospel, and we'd get to the point and they wouldn't be able to say they were making a decision, and then Victor would say, just wait a minute, and he would talk to them some more on his own, and then he'd look at me and he said, okay, they're ready to pray the prayer. Now, I don't know what all he said to them, but they accepted Christ at that point. So Victor did a great job as my translator. Okay, and one of the best moments that year too was, that's Victor in the picture again. He looks a little different standing up, but the ladies whose back you see there, that's Joanna Lassiter. She was going out with us some to share the gospel. And to have the opportunity to sit there and hear Joanna share the gospel was a great experience, especially the time when she shared the gospel and the lady said yes, she wanted to receive Jesus as her Savior. It blessed me and it blessed Joanna. It was a great time. Okay, then the last thing I want to show you from that year is Joanna was still going out with us, and I didn't put a picture of Andy Clayto in here. He was a Pentecostal pastor who was kind of showing us places to go and share the gospel that year, kind of like Ricardo had done in 2016. But he took us into his home so that we could have some coffee. Now, Joanna never drinks coffee, and I hardly ever drink coffee. In fact, I asked her, and she said, yeah, that's the last cup of coffee she had had. And I think I've had one since on a cruise just to see what it tasted like, and it still wasn't very good. But we drank that coffee because we didn't want to offend them. And it was a good experience to be able to do that. Okay, 2019, this is the place that had the nicest sign that says San Francisco de Ujera, a long name for a place. But we had a great time there. And as you drove in, you saw this nice, beautiful sign in front of it. This is probably the wealthiest village I've ever been to. Okay, this is just a picture of one of the families I shared Christ with. I think 3 of those people accepted Christ. You say that little boy's not young enough. That little boy is probably 9 or 10 years old. You learn early on that the kids are older than they look. And so you don't think, the baby's too young. But any child that's old enough to carry on a good conversation with you or with the translator is old enough to hear the gospel. So I think we had 69 people accept Christ the week that we were in San Francisco de Ujera. And, I know in the past we've had other dentists from Conway go, but this was the first time I had gone that a dentist from Conway had gone. And of course, Mitch King and Hayden went on the trip, and we had a great experience with them. And they had a website, not a website, but they had a presence on Facebook. And we know that because they put a picture that Dr. Capps had posted, and it was really kind of funny. It was of him treating a dog, even though it was kind of a joke. But we knew that they were keeping up with what we were doing. So I checked after we got back, and this is a picture that they had a drone taken of their area. If you look at the very bottom middle, that building that looks like an L, that was the school that we stayed in that year. We had a miracle that happened. Let me get a sip of water. This was the longest trip we ever took, so we had a couple of stops coming back. You can tell I got a piece of my ice in my mouth. Let me put it back in. So anyway, at one of our stops, we're getting loaded back up in the bus, and directly in front of us, the truck and a motorcycle have a wreck. And the guy's laying there and probably would have died if we had not been there. Dr. Capps got over there, and Dr. Hopp got over there, and we had some nurses, and they saved the man's life. Now, we're not sure what happened once the ambulance came and took him away, but he would have surely died if we had not been there. So we saw that that was God's appointment for us. And still to this day, it's the greatest miracle I remember being part of in Honduras. Okay, and also that year I went to Valley of the Angels and got my all-time favorite nativity there. This looks so primitive and was not very expensive, and I've never seen anything even resembling that, so I really, really do enjoy having that. Okay, this year we had 3 missionaries. I didn't tell you that the year before we had the only missionary we had with us was not really a missionary. He was just one of the Hondurans who went along with us to help us. But this year, Eric Duplantis started us off, and then midway in, Jonathan McNair came and spent time with us, and then closing it out was Joseph Bennett. It was a great experience to have 3 different missionaries after not having any the year before. It just shows that maybe BMDMI is getting a little bit better organized and is working harder at it. Okay. An amazing coincidence that happened in Corralito. You see the girl in the background there. Her name is Jody. And she was part of the 4 people that joined us from Houston. And the fact that her brother worked with my brother at the church in Green Acres and had for like 10 years was just kind of an amazing thing that we discovered while we were down there together. Okay, and this is probably my most American translator ever. I called her Kay. Her name was Kayleen or Kaylin or something. And she spent you can tell that she has had some back problems and had a lot of back surgeries when she was very young. So she spent a lot of time in the St. Louis area, and I think she even finished high school in Kirkwood, Missouri, or Kansas, or wherever Kirkwood is in that area. So she spoke very, very good English. You can tell someone speaks good English when they understand my jokes and they can explain them to the other translators. Okay, I showed this because before I showed you how great our immigration was when we got to Honduras. It was great, but then when we came back, it had to be probably the worst experience I've been through in a while, knowing that the COVID-19 was all over the place. So that was kind of a comparison of those two. Now I'm going to tell you one joke, and then we're going to go into our little Bible study kind of time. Now this is my all-time favorite joke. It may be a little offensive, but anyway, I'm going to tell it to you. There's a young man who had a pet cat, and he loved his pet cat. And because of that, he would never leave his cat for more than like a day or so. But he saved up all his vacation time and had like a month-long vacation trip planned to Europe. And he had found a guy that was a friend of his that he could trust to take care of his cat while he was gone. So he gets on the trip and he flies over to London, and he has a great day touring London, and he gets back to his hotel that first day, and there's a note for him to call his friend. And he calls his friend, and his friend says, "Listen, I'm sorry, but your cat died." And the guy is just totally distraught. He says, "I can't believe you told me like that." He says, "What do you mean? How was I supposed to tell you?" He said, "Well, it's just too sudden when you call me and tell me immediately that my cat had died. Maybe you should have written me a letter that said something like your cat is on the roof, and maybe the next day sent me a telegram saying your cat fell off, and maybe a couple of days later say your cat's in the hospital, and then maybe, a couple of days after that call me up and tell me that my cat has died." He says, "I can't believe you did that. I just don't know if I can forgive you for it." He said, "But everything's paid for, so I'm just going to stay on my trip and see if I can finally get over this." Well, the guy went on to Paris, didn't enjoy Paris very much. Then he went through Switzerland and started to feel a little bit better in Switzerland. And he got to Rome and was having a good day in Rome. And he got back to his hotel, and there was a letter waiting for him there, and it said, "Your mother is on the roof." Okay, now let's move on. This is I call that a cat joke. So we're talking about cats a little bit tonight. I actually have pet cats, and I've not had any other animals that we've shown that I had a pet like that, because I don't have dogs, I don't have bears. But it's interesting. I've got some cat facts to share with you, and some of them are normal and some of them are quite unusual. The first one is that cats have different numbers of bones. They have an average about 244 bones. It depends on how long the cat's tail is and how many toes the cat has. They can have between 230 and 250 bones, and of course we have 206 bones. A house cat is 95.6% tiger. A cat can run 30 miles an hour for short distances, which means a cat could outrun Usain Bolt in a 200-meter dash, which is pretty amazing. Cats can jump 5 times their height, and it says that males tend to be left-pawed and females are likely to be right-pawed or ambidextrous. This is the most interesting thing to me. Between 2002 and 2012, the average lifespan of a cat increased by a year. That's just crazy, isn't it? In 10 years, they increased their lifespan by a complete year. This doesn't surprise me. Cats sleep between 12 and 16 hours a day. And meowing is something that cats do strictly for humans. And so we need to remember that. Okay, and that there are 88 million pet cats in the United States, which is the most of any animal, most pets. Okay, and by the way, the cat is the only domesticated animal not mentioned in the Bible. Cats are never mentioned. And that could be because, people in Egypt worshipped cats around that time. And so I'm going to share with you a story. That shows you that and I'm going to share with you a story that was written by Liz Curtis Higgs, and it's about her cats. And the beginning verse is, "But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him." And she said, "We have 2 cats at our house, twin gray tabbies named Bo and Sam, that they adopted from an animal shelter. Our early years together were filled with lavish attention on my part and copious purring on theirs. Then one dark and stormy October morning, the unthinkable happened. My husband Bill and I were headed to the airport for a pre-dawn flight to New England. Rain was coming down in sheets as we dragged our luggage to the back door and fumbled with our umbrella. When I flung open the door, Bo, the smaller, faster, more rebellious brother, appeared out of nowhere, slipped through my legs, and plunged into the darkness without a backward glance. Suitcases forgotten, we tore after him, but Bo remained maddeningly out of reach, bounding forward, doubling back, then taking off again. Finally, we had to leave for the airport. We had to. I was soaking wet and inconsolable. How could I abandon poor Bo to the elements? Yes, our daughter-in-law would arrive at our doorstep in a couple of hours. Yes, Bo would no doubt take shelter in the nearby bushes and be safely back inside the house before our plane landed in Boston. But what if he got lost, got hurt by another animal, got hit by a car? My stomach was tied in knots, thinking of the terrible possibilities. Phone calls and text messages flew back and forth. Our grown children put a rescue operation into motion. Sympathetic friends on Facebook offered suggestions. Put his food bowl outside, put his litter box outside, put your pajamas outside. Apparently the familiar scents were to woo him home. Nothing worked. When we returned from our trip and still no Bo, my heart grew heavier. Was anyone feeding him, caring for him, or was Bo starving to death, alone and shivering, far from home? Meanwhile, Sam wandered from room to room, searching for his lost brother, his mournful meow adding to my guilt. After 12 long days, I stood on our back steps, prepared to try one last suggestion: go outside at midnight when the air is still and call out his name. So I did, as loudly as I could, not caring if our neighbors thought I was daft. Bo! Then I heard it, the faintest meow. Bo! I cried out. Another plaintive meow, like a mother who knows her baby's cry. I knew this was my cat. I knew it. I hurried across our backyard calling his name, so agitated that I forgot about our back fence until I nearly fell over it. Bo! I shrieked, thinking he might come to me. But no, the sad meow was still 100 feet away. Minutes later, armed with a cat carrier and a bowl of food, I opened the back gate and tiptoed across the grass toward a dark shape beneath our neighbor's deck. When Bo meowed again, he didn't budge. I shook his bowl, hoping the sound and scent would coax him out. He extended one tentative paw, then another. The second he got close enough, I threw my arms around him, stuffed him in the cat carrier, and ran back to the house, my heart in my throat. My dear boy wasn't dead. He was alive. He wasn't lost. He was found. I watched him dart around our brightly lit kitchen, tears of joy and relief pouring down my face, and thought about our Heavenly Father, who had once watched my own escape into darkness. He, too, had waited, called my name, came looking for me, knowing I was too scared to come to him, wrapped his arms around me, and carried me home. It's the same story Jesus told of the prodigal son in Luke 15:20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Just as Bo is a changed cat, he comes whenever I call him and lets me scratch his head for hours. I am definitely a changed woman. When God calls, I come running, knowing his love alone has tamed my rebel heart. That's a great story, isn't it? It really is. And even though cats are involved, we know there's a lot more to it than that. So let's have a word of prayer, and we'll close our time together. And then after the prayer, I've got a couple of announcements to share with you. Okay, Lord, we thank you for this time together. I do want to pray for those on our prayer list. Pray that you be faithful in hearing our prayers as we lift them up to you. And Lord, I thank you that you do come after us when we drift away. And we thank you for that. We thank you that you're a good God and you love us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, here's my announcements. First of all, if you've not come back to church and you feel you may want to, I would encourage you to come this Sunday at the 9 a.m. service. The last couple of weeks, our 9 a.m. service has been very lowly attended. You would have a lot of room to spread out and not be near anybody. You could keep your mask on, whatever you want to do, and we're very careful about opening the door for you and making sure you're safe. So if you'd like to try that this week, come to that 9 o'clock service and make sure you see me and say, look, I came to the 9 o'clock service. And the other thing, we're going to start something new for our Wednesday nights. I'm going to start interviewing some of our staff and asking them some things about growing up and their salvation experience and things like that. So we're going to be doing that for a few weeks. You tune in for that next week. I know we've gone a little long tonight and I got a little wound up, but it's good seeing you. And hopefully before too terribly long, we may be able to get back together on Wednesday night. Who knows when that'll be though, because I'm going to keep continuing to do this as long as I need to. Thank you. Bye.